What is VRBO? What are the differences between VRBO and Airbnb as channels? What are some key VRBO features that you need to know about? What are the pros and cons of using a channel like VRBO? What are some pro tips to using VRBO as a platform? And then what softwares might you need if you use multiple channels, including VRBO, Airbnb, or other ones? My name's Sean Rakijich. I'm a host of 7 years making money in the short-term rental space. I've made tens of millions of dollars in short-term rentals. And as of 2022, maybe even 2021, it's essential to go multi-platform. And one of the very main channels you should have your listing on is VRBO. From my experience, I do believe that if you only operate on one channel in the short-term rental market and it's not yet VRBO, adding VRBO will guaranteed increase your revenue because it'll access a new type of customer. Depending on where you are in your listing size, that increase might be 10%, it might be 100 or 200% increase in revenue. Yes, you're not gonna believe it. So in this video, let me tell you all about it. That way you can get your VRBO on. Let's go. Welcome back, Airbnb and multi-platform, multi-channel family for this video. Today, we are talking about the biggest platform in the short-term rental space that I never really mentioned, which is VRBO. Booking.com might boast to have the most listings out of any platform in the world, but Walmart is bigger than Whole Foods, if you know what I mean. And so in this case, I believe VRBO is the best option for multi-channel on the market because they provide a level of service to hosts that Booking.com or other channels don't quite provide, and they have a level of trust with travelers, and it accesses a truly new type of customer for a lot of hosts. So this is really gonna benefit you and increase your revenue. First, let me tell you a backstory about VRBO and how VRBO came to be. See, VRBO is unique to a platform like Airbnb because it started as a conglomeration of hundreds of listing websites. In Europe, there were a ton of little boutique bed and breakfast websites that were then bought up. Over 100 of them were bought up and brought together under the HomeAway platform. Now, VRBO and HomeAway have both been since acquired by Expedia Group. So Expedia Group runs the whole brand, and everything is now being funneled under VRBO because they believed it was their best shot at a good national/worldwide branding campaign. And that's why VRBO has almost out of nowhere become the name, where if only 4 or 5 years ago, I remember people talking about HomeAway. There's a rebranding, but VRBO is here and it's here to stay. This segues directly into the first difference when we talk about what are the differences between VRBO and Airbnb as a platform is the consumer type. VRBO has long since serviced more European travelers and more houses, more bed and breakfasts, more traditional properties for a longer period of time. Where Airbnb was a West Coast product and kind of swept through the United States first, you're gonna get more apartments, you're gonna get more urban listings from a place like Airbnb, and the travelers that started to use it because of that use are more last minute bookings. If you think about the dynamics of how properties get booked, larger groups book further in advance. People who book homes for family vacations book further in advance. Europe's culture of travel books further in advance because of how they get their vacations. They know when they're traveling a little bit more than people here in the western part of the world. Where Airbnb, people are just scrapping, getting by, going to last minute trips for business, coming to a city for an event, by the seat of your pants style travel. So the first very clear difference between VRBO and Airbnb is the booking lead time is longer on VRBO, which in a way creates this non-competitive type of channel distribution, except for, we're gonna be honest, VRBO would get booked first, thus taking away market share from Airbnb. So they probably don't want me telling you about VRBO right now, but this is in your best interest, right? And that's what really matters. So if you have a house on VRBO, it could get booked 6 months in advance at a premium, where if you had a house on Airbnb, it could get booked 2 months in advance at a premium. You'll get more last minute activity on Airbnb just because of total volume, but we are still also getting more last minute traffic on VRBO as people start to notice that there's more apartments on VRBO. Like all of our properties, over 90% of them are like studios or 1 bedrooms. We do have some 3 bedrooms and etc., but we are seeing an uptick in VRBO bookings even in the urban areas, which is cool. And that's why I think it's timely to bring you this video. Because of this house first business model from VRBO, their platform is structured completely different than the Airbnb platform. And this is another one of the key differences. You as a service provider, as a host, need to understand this. One of the things that Airbnb does do really well is they have something called Pro Tools, which is designed for people like us who have multiple listings. And they give us some cool features like a multi-calendar where you can see tons of listings all at one time, where you can see all of those calendars as they push to the right like a line into infinity, which is cool. Unique length of stay discounts, like 2-day, 5-day discounts, which I do believe VRBO is going to add one day because it's a simple fix, but currently VRBO only has a 7-day and monthly discount because of the typical nature of their travel. VRBO doesn't have a product like AirCover per se, but they allow you to legitimately collect security deposits, and you can charge the guest for trip insurance. Now, if you take steps to insure your own place, VRBO does go farther to protect you, but if you take a completely dry, no insurance approach, VRBO is less likely to support you in cases where guests do really bad stuff. The other side of the coin, though, is because of the type of traveler that VRBO has, we get less bad guests than Airbnb. Airbnb has more of a bad rap for bad guests. Even though I have seen in recent news now that guests have mistreated spaces more on VRBO, I'm still not seeing things like shootings and gang activity on VRBO. It's still mostly just Airbnb. So it's a good diversification if you want less risks as far as bad guests in your property, I would say. VRBO also has a different approach to strictness on cancellations. They stand by hosts a lot more than Airbnb does when it comes to cancellations, and a lot of you know this because of COVID. Airbnb essentially reversed a lot of our cancellation policies and gave guests back a bunch of money, even though the contract did not say something like pandemic in extenuating circumstances. Airbnb did decide to call an audible. You could argue this robbed a lot of hosts of millions and millions of dollars. They gave some back, but they still really wronged the Airbnb community, and there's still a lot of scar tissue there. VRBO didn't do that. VRBO has a more hands-off approach to their bookings than Airbnb. Even though Airbnb's contract says that our contracts are with our guests directly, Airbnb has a tendency to step in and do whatever they want whenever they feel like it. And a lot of us hosts have opinion about that. But VRBO is so hands-off even that you need to upload your own booking contract onto VRBO. They don't give you boilerplate language in which to run your business. They're going to trust you to run your business and have a booking contract. That will get covered later in the pros and cons section of this video, but now let's get into some key VRBO features so you can understand what you're working with on VRBO. One of the very first features that I'm excited about with VRBO, if you're not using a pricing management software that then allows you to update prices through some form of automation, which you shouldn't be doing unless you have a lot of listings anyway. So with VRBO for smaller operators, this is really cool. They allow you to change your nightly rate by the day. And if you look at the data from Wheelhouse, which I can try to show you here right now, you'll see that Fridays make very slightly less money than Saturdays. Sundays make more money than Mondays. Thursdays make more money than Wednesdays or Tuesdays typically. So it is important to recognize this for pure optimization purposes on any platform. So VRBO allows you to feather up your Thursday prices or feather up your Sunday prices or slightly feather down your Friday if you want to compared to your Saturday, and give you a really granular approach to the days of a week. Instead, where Airbnb just gives you weekday and weekends, this allows you to do by the day. And back to damage protection. Airbnb allows you to charge your guests for damage protection or to collect a security deposit. Now, this level of control allows you to then offset some of your risk without you having to pony up money for a insurance. Something like State Farm's insurance or Proper or Superhog or Slice or all those other products are products that you have to pay for. Except for this one, your guest pays for it. And now this is a deterrent against bad guests. And if you're not looking to get as many bookings as possible on a platform, but you just want the best bookings, something like this is great, because people who will pay for trip insurance will gladly understand they're trying not to damage your property and they're willing to pay a little extra money to give you that assurance. These are more considerate guests when they're willing to pay for your trip insurance. VRBO has a more comprehensive list of extra fees that you can charge. Now, Airbnb does have an extra fees section as well, but VRBO has really modified this to really be responsive to vacation rentals, like a pool heating fee or a hot tub heating fee, things like this. They've had pet fees longer than Airbnb has had pet fees, right? This is something that Airbnb is catching up on, but VRBO still leads the pack on how granular you can get with fees that you charge. And as you can see at the bottom, VRBO even allows you to charge for internet usage, much like a hotel would. So you could get hyper granular with what you charge. You can start with a low upfront price and add on some things on the back end and play the same game that Hilton or Marriott does with your prices. The most notable and different feature I think that VRBO has is their payment terms. When you book on Airbnb, they charge you for the reservation right there, but they hold on to the money. On Booking.com, they charge you for the reservation, and then the host gets the money right away if they're integrated with Stripe, which is kind of cool. VRBO has this interesting approach where you could demand that a guest pays right now for the whole booking, which could include a 5-month reservation, where Airbnb only collects for the first month and then they book it monthly. This other way that you can do it is you can charge half now and half later, or 50% now, 25% in other increments. VRBO VRBO creates this 1, 2, 3 approach to like payment processing. This is great if you know what kind of guests that you get and you want to very specifically structure payment terms around a very specific type of traveler, very specific length of stay, a very specific amount of lead time. And I do believe that this is why VRBO can get more far in advance bookings, because if you only charge 50% of a reservation to book 6 months in advance, and then you've got some really strict cancellation policy that, they get a refund only if they cancel more than 60 days in the future. Well, what happens is you collect 50% of your money on VRBO, and then they have to bone up the rest of it, say 60 days in when the strict cancellation policy falls off. Well, if that person doesn't pay it, your listing gets back on the market, and now VRBO or Airbnb can both try to get another customer, where you probably weren't gonna get a customer on Airbnb anyway, so only collecting half the money was like a really efficient 1-2 punch for this. So if people cancel, they lose the half the money that they put down because they canceled inside of your strict cancellation policy, and voila, you can manage your revenue better and manage your occupancy better using split payment terms for far in advance lead times. As objectively as I can be on this topic, the pros and cons of VRBO compared to other platforms, I do think VRBO leads on lead time. And in this world, revenue management, we talk about pricing strategy all the time, lead time is king. If you can get booked 6 months in advance, you can raise your prices a little bit on the rest of your calendar. Like if you have 20 or 30 properties and VRBO leads the way and helps you book 25% of your calendar before you even needed Airbnb, you can increase your prices. That's a huge pro. Now, one of the cons is that they don't have quite the comprehensive level of host coverage for bad guests, so you might have to modify, and we honestly do have a 2-night minimum on VRBO where we don't do it for Airbnb, but it's also because VRBO doesn't give us the ability to modify our pricing strategy as granularly as we do on Airbnb, and that's another con, is that VRBO doesn't have 2-day, 3-day, or 4-day discounts, where our pricing strategy with Airbnb is we jack our rates up 50%, and then we'll do a discount at 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days to come back down to a normal price, but only for a longer length of stay. We would do something like that on VRBO and just pay for insurance on a 1-night stay if somebody paid us a king's ransom for 1 night. VRBO doesn't give us that opportunity, so our business starts at 2 days or starts at 3 days instead of starting at an inflated 1-night rate. So that lack of responsiveness is a con, but I do think VRBO will fix it one day. I would actually speculate that once the dev team sees this video, they'll probably put some gas in that tank because they want to catch up to all of their competitors and lead the pack in every way. And if pricing strategy is one of the few things that they lack on, then ta-da, now they know that this is where they can go for the jugular and start putting their competitors out of business, per se. One of the pros I'm most grateful for is the guests. I'm so grateful for VRBO guests. The VRBO culture is still more pure, where Airbnb I think grew too fast, and you get more of a mixed bag with Airbnb guests. So I know they don't give as much host coverage, which we talked about, but we also don't have as much risk. Thank you, VRBO, for having awesome people at our properties. I really do appreciate that. Now, this is a pro and a con, right? The staying out of your business part. The con is the barrier to entry is not quite as low. They don't give you a free booking contract that you can just go, hey, here's exactly what you need to do to make sure that your guests behave and how to line it all out. That's something that you have to figure out yourself. And I will give you all a free booking contract template in the future. So subscribe to this video and hit that bell icon, because when I do my next VRBO video, I will give you a booking contract, but you have to be here to get it. But the other side of that coin, staying out of your business though, means that when you have your booking contract and you're doing everything right and you have a defense against a guest claim or something happens in the economy, VRBO doesn't just go in and steal all of your money. Right? They do a better job of putting hosts first and making sure that we get our money. Because I do believe that VRBO understands the relationship between inventory and revenue, where Airbnb may not get it as much, where they don't understand that when we marry off our contract to a guest who's been booked for 2 months or 3 months, if they cancel last minute, we just won't make the same revenue. It's less severe on Airbnb because we do get more last minute bookings, but that's no excuse for a platform to abandon hosts when it comes to cancellations and stuff like that. Now, pro tips if you're using the VRBO platform. If you're going to use VRBO, you do need to have a slight cultural shift in mind here. Your pricing strategy should be more long lead time based. You should have a minimum night stay, and you should plan to charge your guests for self-insurance. Otherwise, you do need to go out and find a different insurance like Proper or Superhog or something like that. Pro tip number 2 is your prices will be different. This is called price discrimination. And in the newspaper industry where I'm from, this used to happen. When you had a new subscriber, you charge them less money to try to get them in the door. And then based on the zip code that somebody lived in, if they lived in like a rich neighborhood, their monthly rate would go up farther than if somebody lived in a more poor neighborhood. So the cost of a monthly newspaper subscription was based on where the person lived, like general income bracket of those areas. And so in a way, price discrimination applies here. VRBO, people will pay a little bit more for a place because you have less competition, and it tends to be more of a expectation of quality with VRBO. And the people who book on VRBO are a little bit more affluent as well, so there's more money in the game there per customer. So you should have higher rates on VRBO than you do on Airbnb. A third pro tip, and this will apply to you in life, don't rush it, all right? Don't rush anything that you're learning. It's cool to get the listing up, and it's cool to start making money, but just like with Airbnb, just the same, if your listing is set up improperly or incomplete, it's going to have consequences on the back end. VRBO is technically more clunky. There's more like avenues and channels and rabbit holes that you can go down in your listing. There's tons of little tabs that have like very small effects on your listing. You do need to take time, study the platform before you just go rushing into the breach and throwing a bunch of product on there. You're also gonna wanna connect your calendars if you have multiple channels. And we're gonna talk about that in the tech section next, because you can do this with the software. Next pro tip is about payments. You're going to want to set up some form of Stripe style payment system for VRBO. Start setting that up right away. Start getting used to how the whole layout of the back end of Stripe works. You're going to be dealing with disputes for payments on your own with your own direct booking platform anyway and stuff like that. And VRBO is the first window into dispute management that you'll see before you start going into the more dangerous stuff like booking.com. Now for that pro tip about splitting up payments, this is kind of fun. So knowing that VRBO books further in advance than Airbnb or other places, you can set up where you have a two payment system where somebody has to pay 50% right now. And then you can have a really strict cancellation policy where if somebody books and cancels inside of 60 days, which is not a typical cancellation policy on Airbnb, but if they cancel inside of 60 days, they won't get that 50% back. So now what you do is you have that second payment due in more of a shorter period of time, but that 50% due further out. And if somebody does end up canceling on VRBO within that very specific window of time inside of 60 days, you'll get to keep half the money, right? Because you only took half the payment. Now, what's fun about this now is your calendar's open again, and both Airbnb and VRBO could get you some bookings. But Airbnb never really had long lead time anyway. So Airbnb's cancellation policies tend to suck compared to VRBO's. And you only taking half of the money for a booking on VRBO allows you to get further out, more longer lead time reservations, because somebody doesn't want to pay $4,000 up front for a reservation that's $4,000 if it's 9 months from now. They'll gladly put $1,000 or $2,000 down reasonably for something that's further out, but they don't want to have to pay the whole thing and just give it away to VRBO, right? Logic would infer that. So do a partial payment on VRBO until a certain window of time out, and let that be your way to get more VRBO bookings with long lead time. And then if somebody cancels and you get a piece of money from VRBO, then let VRBO and Airbnb scrap it out on more last minute, like within a couple of months. This way, if somebody books more last minute on VRBO, they'll make the full payment. But if they book 9 months in advance, they'll only make a partial. This is an optimization thing. And as you get into multi-channel, you're gonna see that certain channels have advantages, like very specifically this one, and it allows you to make just so much more revenue and just have a better time managing what we call pace. And that way you have longer lead time further out. People book further out, it makes your calendar more strong, you make more money. I talk about this kind of stuff a lot in my pricing strategy videos, so go back and watch those. So now what other softwares do you need? What other softwares, if you're doing like VRBO, Airbnb, Booking.com, Furnish Finder, stuff like that, what other softwares do you need or might you need? Well, I currently use Host Hub to connect VRBO and Airbnb calendars. This is just the quickest way and the cheapest way to do calendar connection through like an instant API connection. It's not the hottest software out there. It doesn't do a bunch of stuff, but for the price, it does what it needs to. Now, when you connect a full channel manager, like Guesty or Hostfully or other stuff like that, because of how it connects, it starts to screw with pricing strategy. So you don't want to just add a channel manager for no good reason until you start using something like Wheelhouse or Price Labs or Beyond Pricing. For example, Wheelhouse and Price Labs, they may or may not push to VRBO, right? But using a pricing automation software that connects to something like Hostfully or Tokeet or Guesty or something like that, and then pushes your prices to your other channels, is going to allow you that freedom that you need to adjust rates through one window, which is going to be your pricing management software, and push it through a channel manager. But if you get a channel manager before you have a good understanding of a pricing software, you're gonna try to learn 2 platforms at once, and it's going to be a hot mess. If anything, learn one at a time. So let's build up. Get on multiple platforms and then add HostHub. Maybe even get your own direct booking platform, like maybe use Boostly for a website, something like that. And Mark Simpson actually just released a book on how to get more direct bookings. And he doesn't know I just told you that. Actually, I'm just telling you because I think it's valid. And he's actually really great at direct bookings. So go find Mark Simpson from Boostly and get his book, if anything, and then make that decision if you want to get a website first, because you have a couple paths for this. But essentially, multi-channel, connect with HostHub, maybe get your own direct booking website, because now you have Stripe and you can start taking those payments, get used to that. Then add a pricing software like Wheelhouse or something like that, so that way you can start to manage prices between your multiple channels. Then connect a channel manager to do everything else that you need, like unified inboxes, price discrimination. There's things called rate multipliers, so you can actually have a pricing system built into something like Wheelhouse. It pushes to a channel manager and it'll multiply rates on VRBO and make everything more expensive. Like I told you, your rates should be more expensive on VRBO anyway, right? So it's gonna have a lot of implications over time. I realized that all my advice on the other types of softwares that you would need to get started with multi-channels like VRBO and Airbnb all can now be done by HostHub. This is actually so dumb of me to not even think about it. SyncBnB became HostHub. And when they became HostHub, they started adding features, like even a direct booking website builder, and then calendar management. And the reason why you want calendar management is you're gonna have checkouts on Airbnb, you're gonna have direct booking checkouts, you're gonna have VRBO checkouts, you're gonna have all those types of checkouts, and you need one place to know what apartments or what homes need to get cleaned. And so we do this all by hand. And so even a calendar management software like HostHub is enough for us to go, hey guys, all right, let's go and get everything cleaned. So you can just literally start with HostHub, and it's cheap and it's nice, which is good. And before I go, let me just show you my payouts. VRBO gave me $48,000 in one payout. How's that for some revenue porn, huh? Little motivation for you guys. So have some fun, guys. If you have questions about VRBO or otherwise, you know to leave it in the comments. We're gonna do a lot more conversations about technologies, channels, operations, as per usual. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you on the other side.